Good morning, gentlemen. Today is the 49th segment of Think Before You Speak series with a few stories. The laws of Shemirat, Halashon, and clarity. Lilu Nishmat, the Chafetz Chaim, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. Lilu Nishmat, Eli ben Simcha, Ruach Hashem Tenicheno Began Eden. Lilu Nishmat, Luz Aliza bat Henriette and her children that passed in the fire. Ruach Hashem Tenicheno Began Eden. These halachot are also dedicated to the Yeshuot Gdolot of our Bnei Chabura, especially Moshe ben Leah. And these halachot are specifically dedicated to the Yeshua Gedola and the Shmira Me'alya Min HaShamayim for Chaim Davido ben Chayesar. Today's halacha, children. Now think about this for a minute. One of the most beautiful moments that a child remembers growing up in their parents' home are Shabbat and Chagim. It's those sit-downs at the Shabbat table. That's the glue that keeps families together. By the Shabbat table, on those beautiful Friday night meals, the conversations carry through the night like the Zemirot that are sung. Those conversations sometimes can go south. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara shows up and would love to take the opportunity of something so beautiful, so kadosh, and turn it in a direction that would be has v'shalom, just the opposite. And because of that, at the time that a father is monitoring and engaging with his children, he has to monitor and engage their method of speech and the way they talk. So you could have a child sitting at the table on a Shabbat Friday night, and he turns to his parents and he says, wow, this week, there was a kid in class and he says to you the name, and he got thrown out this week 3 times. Would you believe it? And then after he got thrown out, the Rebbe took him to the office because he was chutzpahdik on top of what he did wrong in class. Now, as a father, you're listening to this. What do? Well, at first you could say to yourself, he's a kid. He doesn't really realize what he's doing. But now's the time. This is the time to step in. This is the moment of chinuch. What you're going to do now, the seeds that you're going to plant now are going to show great fruit later on in life. It'll make it so much easier for this boy to be a Baal Shomer Piv Ulshono, Shmirat Halashon, later on, if you plant the seeds of Shmirat Halashon now. So a father very gently, with a lot of love and a lot of warmth, doesn't embarrass the child, has v'shalom, but rather he turns to his child and he says to him, my son, you're such a good kid. You have such a good way about you. You have beautiful midot. Talking that way about people, it's beneath you. You're better than that. You're a good kid. You see good in people. You're not the type that harps on the negative of the people. You probably didn't realize that what you just said was Lashon Hara. Now, a boy of your stature, a boy that one day is going to grow up to be a great Talmid Chacham, words like that shouldn't come out of his mouth, because a mouth like yours was dedicated for great tefillot to be heard. A mouth like yours was dedicated to speak divrei Torah. Let me hear from you a divrei Torah on the table. Wow, that father just gave his son such a pumping schmooze, such a shot in the arm of confidence of what he should be and what he could be and what he should stay away from and not become. In a nice way, Dad just told him, that's Lashon Hara, and that should never be spoken. The son hears it in a way that he can digest it, in a way that it actually builds him rather than breaks him. That's the moment that the father did for the son, the greatest act of chinuch. He taught him at a young age, do not speak Lashon Hara. If somebody hears his children speaking Lashon Hara, we have an obligation, midin chinuch, even if they're on the bar mitzvah, to prevent them from speaking Lashon Hara in the way that we just described in the story. Parents have a chiyuv to educate their children to stop and refrain, never to speak Lashon Hara, and to teach them the halachot, to show them what's forbidden and what's not. A child should know that it's not okay to speak Lashon Hara. It's not okay to lie. Don't let it go. but nicely explain to them. Because when they hear it when they're young, it'll be so much easier to do something about it and to stay away from these things when they're older. At the same time, Lashon Hara is so widespread. And when people grow up and they speak it and no one stops them, it's our fault that later on they become Baal Lashon Hara. Because on other areas, we won't stand for it. Could you imagine if your kid came home with something that didn't have a hechsher? He came home with food that's taref, non-kosher food. You wouldn't sit back and just stay quiet. You jump in and say, what are you doing? There's no hechsher. Don't eat that. Now, I'm not saying to do it that way, but we wouldn't stand for it. Lashon Hara is something we should not stand for. It's not okay. And if we do so when they're young, later on, they'll be shomer, piv u'lushono. If children are trained from an early age not to speak Lashon Hara, not to lie, not chas v'shalom nibul peh, not to curse, it'll be easier for them to control themselves later on in life when they grow older. It's up to us to make a stand now so that later on, the magnificent perot that come out of our children's mouths will be one that will not only be a beauty, a virtue for themselves, but it'll tell you a lot about the parents that raised them. Thank you for listening.